The ricotta lasagna had gone cold twice. By the clock above the mantel, built by Iris's dad in 1979, the year she turned 16, the hand sat at 9:12 p.m. The second hand, doing its honest little loop like it hadn't noticed everything else in the room, had slipped its screws. 6 chairs waited at the dining table. Mahogany I refinished the year Lena left for college. Lamplight pooled honey yellow on the surface, catching on 6 careful place settings: our white and cobalt china, silver forks straight as rails, linen napkins folded into those tidy restaurant triangles Lena used to admire when she was small enough for her feet to swing and miss the floor. Overhead, blue and silver streamers sagged under the weight of ours. Balloons that had looked ambitious at noon now bobbed like exhausted swimmers. In the kitchen, a cake sat untouched, vanilla with buttercream. Happy 61st, Calvin piped in neat chocolate loops that felt less like a celebration and more like a verdict the longer I stared. The whole house smelled like Iris's lasagna recipe. I started at noon. Garlic. Basil, crushed tomatoes coaxed into a slow, glossy sauce. I layered it the way I used to lay out a plan set. Ricotta folded with fresh spinach, pasta sheets rolled thin as tracing paper, mozzarella spread like fresh snow. When Lena was 8, she called it layers of sunshine. Tonight the sunshine cooled in its pan. Condensation haloed the wine glasses no one had lifted. My phone sat quiet on the coffee table. No calls, no apologies, not even a text saying running late. At 5 o'clock I started checking every 15 minutes. At 7 I was still making room for circumstance. Traffic on I-5, a wrong turn, a quick detour for candles I didn't need. By 8:30, hope had leaked out of me the way a pipe leaks. No drama, just relentlessness. At 9:12 all that was left was the ticking, the sagging decorations, and the sound of the Kwan family next door laughing their way through a birthday big enough to share a wall with. From their place came the clatter of an actual gathering, kids squealing, plates finding plates, the dependable percussion of a home where people show up. Mrs. Kwan had waved over the fence that morning and asked if I needed help. "Family's coming," I'd said, standing a little taller. "My daughter and her husband. First time in a while we'll all be together." Now their laughter floated through the thin Tacoma summer walls, like a cruel echo of the scene I had promised myself. I looked at the cake again. Happy 61st, Calvin. No exclamation point. Just a period, less greeting, more sentence. I sat down in Iris's chair, the blue velvet one that still held a breath of her lavender hand cream, even though she'd been gone 5 years, and let the room tilt into old light. On my 30th, Iris baked even though baking wasn't her gift. "Store-bought doesn't say I love you," she insisted. Hair pinned like gravity liked her better. The cake collapsed in the middle, frosting slid to one corner, and she laughed so hard she had to sit on the floor. Lena, 5, balanced on a chair, clapped offbeat, while I pretended to blow out the same candle twice just to hear them sing again. That birthday warmed the walls for weeks. Tonight I had a flawless cake and not one person to cut it with. The clock chimed the bottom of the hour, each note a small nail tapping the lid on what was left of hope. Iris used to say the clock kept perfect time because it was made with love. Tonight it only measured humiliation. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over the photo of Lena from last December, her arms looped around me, head tilted in Iris's patented angle. I called up 3 rings. Then her voice. "Hey, Dad." Polite. A visitor, not a resident. Everything okay? A beat. Music behind her. Soft guitars, the kind seaside hotels pipe in when they want you to think of sunsets. Laughter that wasn't ours. "There's a last-minute thing with Damon's work," she said quickly. "Those are priority coordination. We need to focus on our core family unit tonight." Core family unit. Lena used to invent words when she couldn't find them. Thingamajig for nutcracker, clippy-doo for a paperclip. Now she sounded like a PDF. "That so?" "It'll resolve," she said. "Happy birthday, Dad, Calvin." She added my first name with the neatness of scissors. "Not Daddy, not Dad, not Pops from her bratty sweet years, Calvin." "Thank you," I managed. "I should go," she added. "This situation needs my full attention." The line went dead at 3 minutes, 46 seconds. I stared at the timer like it could be argued with. 3:46. The measure of how long it takes your child to sound like someone who shares your name but not your weather. I blew out the candles alone. 61 little suns went dark. blue threads of smoke climbing the air. The wax mounded at the wicks like tears that had made up their minds. I slid the lasagna into the refrigerator, the way a man shelves a relic, carried the unopened wine back to the basement to wait for an occasion that might bother to come, and returned to Iris's chair. The velvet was cool, as if memory had a temperature. Humiliation pressed like a sandbag. Under it, something else woke, a gritty steel-wool stubbornness that didn't know how to lie down. Determination, the kind that starts in the jaw and radiates. I unlocked the phone again, not to call Lena, to open a browser. Two-finger typing like a man who still loves pencils. Facebook. The password failed twice before my hands recalled their old affection. Iris 1979 love. The feed loaded like a time capsule. Condolences stacked after Iris's funeral. Then thinned, then stopped the way rain does. I wasn't there for sympathy. I typed his name, Damon Clark. His profile appeared with a professional smile that felt leased. Then came the squares. Photos arrived like little doors you don't want to open and do anyway. Linen shorts. Sunglasses so simple they were expensive. An orange drink in the sun. The geotag, Santorini, Greece. The next one was worse and better. Lena at a table draped in white linen. The sea behind her so blue it looked staged. She was laughing. A strand of hair cut across her cheek. Across from her, Damon's parents lifted their own glasses, matching smiles under matching straw hats. A boat shot, water carved with white tracks as neat as stitches. Damon at the helm, grinning like he'd charted the horizon. Lena beside him with a lifted hand that might have been a wave. It might have been a promise she didn't owe. Caption, quality time with the ones who count. Tablecid family goals. Cyclades the ones who count. My hands trembled, not with weakness, but with the fine quiver metal makes when it's taking a load. I took screenshots, named them with an engineer's petty precision, Santorini 1 through Santorini 12, and slid them into a folder. Clark evidence. The phone lit with an incoming call. Damon, I watched his smirk blink 3 times and answered on the 4th. Calvin, he drawled, sunlight in his vowels. Behind him, waves, guitars, the clink of expensive glass. About tonight, this little birthday fixation, it's getting a bit sad, isn't it? I kept my air. Lena doesn't need the guilt, he went on, easy as leaning back. We're building our own family now. Our own traditions. You get that, he sharpened. She's got a husband. Not some pity dinners where you play house with your dead wife's china. Iris's china. He'd seen the photos I texted Lena earlier in the week. Place settings aligned like respect. Napkins folded like memory. He was using my love as a lever. You're right, I said evenly. Silence. He'd been waiting for a crack, not a mirror. What? You're right, I repeated. Lena has her own life. Her own priorities. And when you get back from Greece, I'll have a surprise for both of you. The smile left his voice with a clean click. What kind of surprise? The kind that helps families see where they actually stand. The water behind him sounded very far away and very interested. Enjoy the rest of your vacation, Damon, I said. Take lots of pictures. Make lots of memories, I hung up. The clock resumed its honest ticking. The room shifted. This wasn't about a party anymore. It was about my daughter. Engineers survive impossible spans by breaking them into solvable sections. I pulled a notebook from Iris's desk and printed a list in patient block letters. Verify timeline. Document spending. Track travel. Investigate personal links. Protect myself. Present truth without breaking Lena. The list steadied the air. Ted held the night still. By morning, an old colleague texted me a name he trusts with both contracts and coffee. Sloane Mercer, private investigator. Her voice on the phone was crisp without cruelty. Public place, she said. The Elm Street tea room. Good light, better scones. 2 p.m., she suggested. I looked at the lasagna, at the slumped streamers, at the clock that had kept faith longer than it should have. 2, I said. I put on the navy jacket Iris always said made me look like I knew what I was doing, and I left the house that smelled like garlic and history, ready to measure a crack and give it its true name. The Elm Street tea room smelled of bergamot and warm butter the moment I stepped through its glass-paneled doors. Afternoon light washed across lace curtains, and porcelain cups clinked like they had secrets. Sloane Mercer was already seated by the window, posture composed. a leather notebook spread in front of her like an instrument she was born knowing how to play. She rose just enough to meet me halfway with a handshake. Mid-40s, grey eyes sharp without cruelty, dark hair tied back in a knot that said practicality came before fashion, but didn't cancel it out. "Mr. Reeves," she said. "Calvin," I corrected gently. Her mouth lifted half an inch. "Calvin it is. Sit. Tell me what brought you." I sat, the velvet cushion sighing under my weight, and laid out the night the way an engineer lays out a report. Measured, factual, stripped of the trembling that wanted to intrude. The lasagna, the cake, the silent phone, the call with Lena. Damon's smug vowels from across the sea. The pictures, Santorini, the caption about the ones who count. Sloane's pen moved fast, shorthand neat as stitches. She didn't interrupt, just raised her eyebrows once when I mentioned Damon calling Iris's china pathetic. When I finished, she closed the notebook softly, a sound that carried the weight of a verdict. "What do you suspect?" she asked. "Manipulation," I said. "Financial pressure. Maybe worse. He's isolating her, making her talk like a manual. End goal. Not revenge," I answered. "Rescue," that half-smile returned. "Good. Anger fogs evidence. Rescue clarifies." She tapped her pen against the margin. "I can trace money, monitor activity, scan public records, flag inconsistencies. If it touches sunlight, I'll find it. 10 days for a comprehensive sweep, or 48 hours for a first cut," she named her rate. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket, thick with bills I hadn't touched since Iris passed. It had been our cruise fund, the trip we never took. I slid it across the table. She accepted without ceremony. "You'll hear from me before you expect to," she said. 2 days is long when you're counting. I filled mine like someone trying not to drown. At the barbershop, Eddie carved winter off my head and mapped a jawline in the mirror. "Big meeting?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. At the dry cleaner, Mrs. Vaux pinched the shoulders of my suit jacket. "We make you sharp," she said in her fractured English. "Your wife like you sharp." "She did," I whispered, and didn't correct her tense. Back home, I installed the doorbell camera I'd avoided since Iris died. It took me 2 hours, 3 muttered corrections, and 1 small laugh at myself, but when the blue ring lit up, I felt the flicker of something I hadn't in years: control. In the mornings, I walked 3 miles by the Sound, gulls heckling indiscriminately. At night, I read about coercive control, financial abuse, love bombing. Every page turned a suspicion into a definition. I practiced sentences into Iris's old recorder. "Calvin, this isn't about your pride. It's about Lena's safety. Do not shout. Do not beg. Present facts. Offer choices." I replayed them until my own voice sounded like someone I'd believe. At 2:11 on the second afternoon, my phone buzzed. Package at door. Through the new camera, I watched Sloane climb the steps, a thick manila envelope tucked under her arm. She rang once, nodded into the lens, and left. I carried the envelope inside like it was radioactive. At the dining table, under the sagging streamers I hadn't yet torn down, I opened it. Colored tabs bristled from the edges like warning flags. Sloane had written a note on top. "Read slowly. Don't be alone when you do." I ignored the second instruction. The first section, numbers. Credit cards in Damon's name, but registered to Lena's address. Balances deep in the red. Minimum payments skipped. Their personal loan at 29% APR, filed just 6 weeks ago. The second, gambling transactions, payments to an online platform in Malta. Each charge ordinary in size, relentless in pattern. $250, $300, $400. Addiction camouflaged as routine. The third, receipts from a luxury hotel in Santorini. 2 ocean view suites, 3 nights, all billed to Lena's card. A boutique watch in Athens. A chartered yacht. All time-stamped to match Damon's cheerful uploads. The fourth tab made my throat tighten. Screenshots of public Instagram stories, reflections in mirrors, shadows on tiled balconies. A woman named Sophia M. appeared in fragments. A bracelet here, a voice note there. The words weren't explicit. They were worse. "You look good in that shirt, keep it. Send me the photo when she's asleep." I put the pages down like they could bite. The refrigerator hummed. The old clock ticked. Outside, a gull sounded like a child trying not to cry. I picked up the phone and called Sloane. "You weren't supposed to be alone," she said without hello. "I'm not," I answered. I've got a house full of ghosts. But I need something else now. What's that? Chairs, I said. And witnesses. She was quiet a beat. Then, good. Witnesses tamper with people's favorite version of themselves. I texted Julia Bennett, the lawyer who had guided me through Iris's will a lifetime ago. Saturday at 5. Quiet matter. Papers involved. She replied within minutes. Yes, tea, not coffee. Over the fence, I found my neighbor, Miguel, elbow deep in rosemary. You might need to water your plants very aggressively around 5 on Saturday, I said. He squinted at me. I can drown them if necessary. You safe, Cal? I will be, I said. He nodded, wiping soil onto his jeans. Then I'll bring the hose and my best face. The plan was set. Now I needed Lena home. The airport is a theater of exhaustion. Gate 19B was no different. Families slumping with carry-ons. The shuffle of rubber soles on thin carpet. I stood at the rail as passengers poured through. Lena came first, a dress the color of dusk. Shoulders hunched the way people hunch when they've slept in overpriced rooms. Her eyes found mine and brightened like a porch light recognizing its owner. Dad? She said, and the word put my chest back together. Damon followed, tanned and smug, wheeling a suitcase as if it was a trophy. I stepped forward and pressed a cream folder into his hand. Not because I wanted him to hold it, but because sometimes objects choose their owners. For Lena, I said. He smirked out of habit. He opened it out of pride, and the smirk slid off his face like a bird startled from a wire, silent, abrupt, inevitable. What's this? Lena asked, her fingers brushing the pages. Things you deserve to see, I said. Let's sit somewhere with chairs that belong to us. Damon started to sputter, rehearsed lines about context and exaggeration. I shook my head once. Not at gate 19B, I told him. You'll lose. We walked past baggage claim, past the people holding flowers, into a silence that wasn't hostile. It was the kind you get before a choir begins, and at home, beneath the steady eyes of neighbors and the creak of the old clock, the truth was about to find its audience. We didn't sit at the dining table. I wouldn't feed this reckoning in the same room that had once carried birthday candles and lasagna layered like promises. Instead, I led them into the living room, neutral ground, softer light. Miguel was already outside, watering his rosemary with the intensity of a firefighter. Mrs. Vaux had appeared with a tray of cut melon and that unspeaking authority of a woman who fed people when the sky fell. Julia arrived at 5 sharp, her briefcase minimal, hair pinned like the law itself had given her a comb. Lena sat on the sofa, folder balanced on her knees. Damon hovered, pacing grooves into the rug, every inch of him radiating that performance he used in boardrooms. Confident, dismissive, entitled. Julia's voice cut the room open. Lena, you read these at your own pace. Ask questions as you need. You owe no one composure here. Lena opened the first tab. Numbers, columns of balances, dates, interest rates. Her lips moved silently as she counted, the same way she used to when she was 7, and determined to reach 100 without skipping. 6 active cards, Julia murmured, pointing with her pen. 4 near default. A personal loan filed under your address without your consent. Predatory interest, Damon leaned forward. Couples share responsibility. It's not this couple, Julia interrupted. Not these debts. Fraud committed in a spouse's name is still fraud. Lena's brow furrowed, but she kept reading. Hotel receipts, watch boutiques, a yacht charter, each one matched to Damon's public photographs. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. You tagged the hotel, I said quietly. You made the lie timestamp itself. His jaw clicked. Arthur, he stopped himself, fumbling. Calvin, this is being twisted. You're sabotaging your own daughter's marriage. Lena turned a page. Messages. A woman's name, Sophia M., threaded through screenshots like a vine through cracks. Send me photos when she's asleep. 2 rooms are better. Fewer explanations. She read them once, again. A third time, slower, as though repetition might make mercy appear in the margins. It didn't. Please tell me this is fake, Lena whispered. It isn't, Julia answered, stainless but kind. These are public posts, archived before deletion. Damon lunged at the folder. Out of context. She's a colleague. Colleagues don't ask for secret photos in bed, Julia snapped. Lena raised her palm, not in surrender, but like a teacher silencing a classroom. You told me to call him Calvin, she said, voice shaking but clear. So I'd remember boundaries. That it was healthier. She tapped the page. Was that before or after you messaged her that you'd send her Santorini when I was asleep? Damon's face worked itself into half expressions. Defense, anger, pity, nothing stuck. Baby, don't call me that, Lena said. Her voice cracked like glass under stress. Not while I'm reading. He surged toward the hallway, practicing his exit as if leaving would crown him the victor. He tried to pass me. I didn't move. He went around and the front door clicked. Outside, Miguel's hose hissed like punctuation. Lena tipped her head back, eyes fixed on the ceiling as though searching for an escape hatch. Mrs. Vaux slid the plate of melon closer. Julia closed her notebook, waiting. I feel stupid, Lena said finally. You're not, I told her. You were loved incorrectly. That's a different crime. Her eyes brimmed but didn't spill. Julia leaned forward, steady as scaffolding. We can petition for a financial protection order. No new credit in your name. Full disclosure of his liabilities. Court oversight. Lena's gaze dropped to the pages again. She pressed her thumb against the corner until it bent. Do it, she said. Then she turned toward me. And Dad? Yes? Her smile was small, wobbly, but there. Thank you for the chairs. What followed was less dramatic but more important. Banks were called. Passwords were changed. Julia drafted papers with sentences that knew how to carry weight. Petitioner seeks immediate injunctive relief, prohibiting respondent from initiating or extending any line of credit in petitioner's name, jointly or otherwise. Across the street, Sloane texted captured each time she archived another piece of Damon's online bravado. Miguel tightened the new camera bracket until it could have held a star. Mrs. Vaux cooked as if nutrition could double as armor. Damon, of course, tried other doors. He texted Lena with context, left voicemails with misunderstanding, sent emails CCing his parents, stuffed with regret and not who I am. He posted a sunset about growth, then posted his shoes by a hotel pool captioned, moving forward. The algorithm clapped. We didn't. On Thursday, Sloane knocked with another page. Found this in the state filings, she said. It was an application to register Reeves and Haven LLC under Lena's maiden name. Submitted the very morning Damon flew her to Greece. I held it by one corner, as though touching more might contaminate me. Predators move money like pickpockets move crowds, Sloane explained. Fast, shoulder to shoulder, eyes up. Thank you, I told her, because gratitude, if you use it right, is also a weapon. Saturday at 4:59, Damon returned with his parents and a lawyer, whose suit had never known sweat. They lined up on my porch like a family portrait captioned reasonable people. Julia opened the door. Mr. Clark, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, counsel, we'll be efficient. Your son will sign acknowledgement that the debts are his. He will seek no new credit in Lena Reeves's name. He will communicate through counsel only. Their lawyer smiled with gums. Unreasonable. Julia slid the LLC filing across the coffee table. He stopped smiling. Damon's mother made a bird-like sound. His father rubbed his back like the truth weighed something. You have 5 minutes, Julia said. We'll be here appreciating Miguel's rosemary. They retreated. Returned. Damon scrawled his signature with the stiffness of a man chiseling his own tombstone. Under protest, he muttered. Protest is a hobby, Julia said, sliding the document into her case. Signature is work. Lena's hands were steady now. Return the watch, she said. Proof of refund by Monday. No more apologies in italics. Damon looked to his parents. They looked to the rosemary. He left. Night came in on slippered feet, quiet but undeniable. After everyone left, I stood at the sink and watched Miguel coil his hose under the porch light, salute with 2 fingers, and vanish into his house. On the counter lay the cream folder. Not erased, just closed. The pages inside hadn't changed, but the room had. Because once the truth is named, it starts obeying. The courthouse didn't look like Salvation, just a square building with grey brick and tinted glass. But when Julia handed the clerk our petition, and when the judge signed the order 3 weeks later, something in Lena's life clicked into alignment. The financial protection order was blunt but beautiful. Damon's debts were his alone. No new credit in her name without written consent. The LLC filed under false pretenses, dissolved before it could open a bank account. A bridge cut off before it collapsed. We didn't celebrate at a restaurant. We went to the library. Lena signed her name on a new card, just hers, and checked out 3 books. One on watercolor, one on cognitive restoration, one a photo collection of bridges at dusk. They look forgiven at that hour, she said softly, running her hand over the images. Damon tried different tactics, text messages with context, voicemails about misunderstandings, emails CCing his parents, stuffed with regret and not who I am. On social media, he posted a sunset captioned growth and a poolside shoe shot captioned moving forward. The algorithm clapped. We didn't, instead we froze her credit, changed every password. Julia's sentences hammered into legal filings with the precision of a carpenter setting nails. Petitioner seeks immediate injunctive relief prohibiting respondent from initiating or extending any line of credit in petitioner's name, jointly or otherwise. Sloan captured each of Damon's deleted posts before he could rewrite his own history. Miguel tightened the brackets of the door camera until it could have held a star. Mrs. Vo brought dumplings like they were paperwork for the soul. The house, which had once only echoed humiliation, began to breathe again. Lena started therapy in a small office that smelled of chamomile and paper. She came out of her first session red-eyed but lighter. She says manipulation rewires your brain, she told me in the car. Healing is teaching it to breathe again. We practiced grounding together. 5 things we could see, 4 we could touch, 3 we could hear, 2 we could smell, 1 we could taste. At first it felt like a children's game. But laughter in the middle of fear has a way of becoming medicine. On Saturdays we went to the farmer's market. Bread that cracked when cut, peaches bleeding sugar through paper bags. Miguel haggled too loudly on purpose. Mrs. Vo appeared with wrappers thin as air, pressing them into Lena's hands. The world was suddenly populated with people who showed up. Then one afternoon, a knock we weren't waiting for. Damon's parents stood on the porch with careful faces and a tin of butter cookies that wanted to mean something. I didn't open wide. Lena stood beside me, voice even. If you've come to tell me who Damon really is, she said, I already know. If you've come to tell me who I am, I don't need help. His mother's hand trembled around the tin. We didn't see it, she said, or we liked not seeing. Either way, Lena answered, not unkind, it didn't save me. They left the tin unopened. Lena leaned her forehead against the door for a long breath, palms flat as if testing for heat. I don't hate them, she said quietly. Hate is another chain. I just don't want chains. We took a day and drove west to the coast. The road curled along the Sound, the water flipping silver coins back to the sun. We stopped at a turnout, where the cliff fell away to endless horizon. Bought sugared donuts from a truck, ate them leaning against the railing. Would Mom have liked this? Lena asked, brushing sugar from her hands. She'd have pretended not to because of the drop, I said, and then she'd have snuck her toes right to the edge when I wasn't looking. We left one donut on the railing, as a ridiculous offering. The gulls blessed it with all the solemnity clergy could manage. Weeks became months. Damon's lawyer tried half-hearted maneuvers. Judges stayed indifferent. The protection order held like reinforced steel. Lena painted. At first, small studies of bridges, then larger washes of sky and water that refused straight lines. A cafe owner down the block offered her a wall. 12 watercolors went up, 12 spans. Miguel brought his crew to clap too loudly. Mrs. Vo wore lipstick the color of plum. Julia came with her mother, who touched each frame like they might hum. One piece had no caption, only a date and a pencil line scrawled home. I stood in front of it too long, pretending to study the brushwork. My throat betrayed me. Sunday breakfast became ritual. We fried eggs that didn't stick. Sliced fruit Mrs. Vo insisted on delivering, as if harvest were personal. Read classifieds aloud, laughing at ads that promised both used fishing boats and eternal happiness. For $19.99, support stopped being a word. It became furniture, and one morning, as Lena rinsed plates, she looked at me over her shoulder. Dad, she said. Yes? Thank you for not letting me drown. My throat caught. Thank you for swimming back. The 1962 clock chimed on cue, no longer a judge but a witness. For the first time in a long while, its sound measured something other than humiliation. It measured healing. By autumn, the air turned sharper, and so did Lena. She reclaimed her apartment. The one Damon had once insisted was too small, too old, too temporary. She painted the walls a pale green Iris would have approved of, a shade that caught morning light like calm water. I helped her carry boxes up the stairs, books, Brushes, the watercolor paper she bought in bulk now. When we set the last carton down, she leaned against the doorframe and whispered, "Feels like mine again." Iris would have smiled at that. Ownership of your own life. That was her favorite kind of wealth. Damon made his last attempt in November. He showed up outside Lena's apartment, a bouquet of lilies in his hand and a rehearsed slump in his shoulders. "I'm different now," he said when she cracked the door an inch. "I've changed. I'm in therapy." "I miss us." Sloane had warned us he might try. Julia had prepared the paperwork, the language. Lena, however, didn't need legal vocabulary. She needed only herself. "You miss control," she told him, voice steady. "You miss a woman you could lie to." "I'm not her anymore." He tried to smile, that same salesman curve. "Baby," her hand tightened on the doorknob. "Don't call me that. I am not your baby, and you are not welcome." The lilies drooped between them. When he realized no script could carry him through, he left. The door closed. The bolt clicked. Lena exhaled, shaking once, then straightened. That, she said, was the last ghost. Her art show grew into a workshop at the library, Saturday mornings free, open to anyone. She called it Bridges and Water. Women with quiet eyes came, teenagers hunched in their sleeves, one elderly man who had lost his wife, and painted the same river bend over and over. I went once, sat at the back. Watched Lena explain how watercolor refuses edges unless you persuade it. "You don't control it," she said. "You negotiate with it." "To like life," the class laughed. And I thought, she's not surviving anymore. She's teaching others how. At home, the house softened. The streamers from that birthday came down finally, and the lasagna pans got used for ordinary dinners again. Miguel declared war on raccoons raiding his rosemary and gave us play-by-plays over the fence. Mrs. Vo taught Lena how to fold dumpling wrappers without tearing them, insisting, "You pinch like you mean it." Life is pinching. Julia dropped by with her mother, who pressed cookies into our hands as though the law wasn't enough on its own. Iris's chair, once a shrine to absence, became a place where Lena sat with her sketchbook, pencil tucked behind her ear. On my 62nd birthday, the one after the empty one, I didn't set 6 places. I set 4. Me, Lena, Miguel, and Mrs. Vo, who declared herself family on the fruit side. The cake was simple. "Happy 62nd, Captain." No period. A little exclamation point Lena insisted on. Miguel lifted his glass. "To bridges that hold." Mrs. Vo lifted a melon slice. "To families that repair." Lena raised her eyes, voice trembling but sure. "To my dad, the only engineer who saved me twice." The candles flickered. This time, when I blew them out, the smoke curled not like morning but like incense. The year moved forward. Wood smoke autumn, wet winter, daffodil spring. Lena kept painting. She filled a sketchbook with bridges. Each one dated, each one carrying more sky than water as the months passed. She started laughing again, small at first, then the kind of laugh that made neighbors lean in through open windows. And the house, once a museum of loss, learned to host life again. Late one evening, I pulled down an old album. Pictures of Iris in her yellow dress, Lena at 13 with braces, me with a moustache no one had signed off on. Toward the back, the photos thinned. The year Iris got sick. The camera grew shy. In a clinic notebook, she'd written lists. Teach Lena to drive. Tell Calvin where spare keys are. Write down the lasagna recipe. Leave a note inside the clock. She hadn't found the right time for the note. So I thought. At midnight, I opened the back of the 1979 clock to adjust the pendulum. Tucked behind the panel was folded paper, brittle with age. In Iris's handwriting, "If you're reading this, it means the house remembered us. Please remember it back." I sat in the quiet, the old clock ticking, Lena humming faintly upstairs, and read it aloud into the room. 20 years late, exactly when I needed to. The next morning I knew. Family isn't the cake you're given. It's the table you keep setting. So I set the table again. Fewer chairs, truer ones. By the time my 63rd birthday approached, the house no longer carried the echo of humiliation. It carried footsteps, laughter, the smell of food that meant more than memory. I set the table without hesitation. 4 places again, just enough for the family that showed up. The cake this year was Lena's doing. She piped happy 63rd, Dad, in looping letters. No neat professional chocolate script. Imperfect, slightly tilted but alive with her hand. She giggled when the frosting sagged on one corner. "Guess I inherited Mom's baking curse," she said. I kissed her temple. "Best cake I've ever had." Miguel arrived with ginger ale and a terrible joke about Rosemary warding off evil in-laws. Mrs. Vaux brought a platter of dumplings shaped like little moons. We ate until the clock chimed, and no one apologized for staying late. "Speech," Miguel demanded, leaning back in his chair with a grin. I stood, not for performance but for grounding. I used to think strength meant carrying everything alone. Now I know strength means knowing what to set down, and who will pick it up with you. Families aren't only born, they're built. Lena's eyes shone. "We rebuilt ours," she said softly. Seasons passed. Autumn wood smoke, wet winter. The kind of spring that lets daffodils force their way through even the hardest soil. Lena continued her workshops at the library. She called them bridges after storms now. More people came. Single mothers, teenagers with bitten nails, a retired bus driver who painted sunsets as if they were apologies. I visited sometimes, sitting at the back. I watched her lean over someone's paper and say, "Watercolor doesn't obey control. It obeys patience. You guide it, then you wait." She smiled when she said it, and I thought, she's teaching healing without naming it. In April, Damon resurfaced briefly. He filed an appeal claiming joint marital property. Julia dismantled it like a carpenter dismantling rotten wood, methodical, unflinching. "Pattern," she reminded the court. Judges love patterns. The appeal died before it could breathe. Damon's name grew smaller with each passing week, until it was just another piece of paperwork in a drawer. Lena didn't celebrate the ruling. She painted another bridge instead. This one arched high, spanning a river so wide it nearly left the frame. She called it enough space. At home I made small repairs I had ignored for years. Fixed the rattling vent, replaced the lampshade in Iris's reading corner, put new paint on the porch railing. The house seemed to sigh in relief, as if finally allowed to live instead of mourn. Lena sat in Iris's chair most evenings sketching. One night she looked up and asked, "Do you still talk to Mom?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Mostly to tell her what we've done that she would have liked. Sometimes to ask where she hid the good scissors." Lena laughed, head tilted just like Iris used to. She would have liked tonight. Summer brought small miracles. The Kwan's kids raced scooters down the block, squealing like joy was a sport. Mrs. Vaux introduced Lena to her niece, who joined the art class and started painting fruit bowls that looked like confessions. Miguel finally beat the raccoons, or at least called a truce, and one evening after a library session, Lena showed me her sketchbook. The last page held a watercolor of our house. The porch lights glowed. The windows were warm squares. At the bottom, in pencil, she'd written home. The 1979 clock ticked on, not as a reminder of humiliation anymore, but as a measure of used time, time-filled, time-honored. I thought of Iris's note. "Please remember it back we were." My 64th birthday came with less ceremony and more ease. The house didn't strain under balloons or sagging streamers this time. It simply opened its arms. The kitchen buzzed with life. Miguel brought a loaf of bread still crackling from the oven. Mrs. Vaux arrived carrying a melon so round it looked like the moon had agreed to join us for supper. Julia came with her mother, who pressed a small candle into my hand etched with the word steadfast. Sloane showed up late, sliding a dog-eared paperback across the table. A book on bridge design. She had marked one passage, "Redundancy is not waste. It is mercy built into design." The cake was plain chocolate with white frosting, no script ordered from a bakery. Lena herself had scrawled across it in green icing, "Happy 64th, Dad." Every letter tilted differently, as if handwriting had decided to dance. "Speech," Miguel boomed predictably. I stood, feeling the porch boards settle under my feet. I used to believe strength meant holding everything myself. Now I know. It means knowing what to set down and who will pick it up with you. Families aren't given. They're built. And we've built something worth keeping. The candles lit my daughter's face, steady and unafraid. We blew them out together. The smoke curled upward, but it didn't sting this time. Lena kept teaching. Her Saturday workshops at the library grew so full that the staff had to set up extra folding chairs. She titled the series Bridges and Sky. Students brought stories as fragile as paper and let them dissolve into pigment and water. I watched from the back one, weak as a teenager, painted a bridge collapsing into blue wash. Lena knelt beside him, saying gently, "You don't have to stop at collapse. Add another line. See, a second span. Stronger than the first." The boy smiled for the first time that morning. Meanwhile, Damon faded into the background of life, his name only surfacing when an old envelope arrived with some bank reminder. Julia handled those like weeds, clipped and gone. He posted less online, his captions growing vague and brittle. New horizons, personal growth, lessons learned. But the algorithm had moved on. So had we. The house changed too. Repairs that had been postponed for years finally happened. A rattling vent silenced. Fresh paint turned the porch railing white again. Iris's reading corner glowed with a new linen shade that warmed the light like bread in an oven. Lena often sketched there in the evenings, feet tucked under her, pencil behind her ear. One night she looked up and said, "Dad, sometimes I still think in before and after." I tilted my head. "And?" Then I stop, because it isn't before and after. It's before and bridge. She grinned at her own wordplay, silly and profound at once, and danced a single ridiculous step across the rug. "Mum would have clapped," she added. "She would have," I said, my throat tight with something that wasn't sorrow. Later that summer, Lena had her first small gallery showing at a cafe downtown. 12 watercolors hung in neat rows, bridges, rivers, sky. She hadn't written titles, just dates. People drifted in, sipping lattes, pausing to stare. Miguel showed up in his best shirt, still smelling faintly of rosemary. Mrs. Vaux wore lipstick 2 shades bolder than usual. Julia's mother clutched my hand and whispered, "She's strong." I stood in front of one painting too long, a pale bridge stretching across a dusk river, penciled at the bottom with one word. Home. Lena caught me, rolled her eyes but smiled. Nights on the porch became ritual. The block was alive, kids racing scooters, neighbors laughing. The 1979 clock chimed through the window at regular intervals, but it no longer measured humiliation. It marked presence. One evening, Lena leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Want to hear something ridiculous?" "Always," I said. I kept the wrapper from Damon's gas station proposal. That stupid ring pop. I used to think it meant something sweet. Now I look at it, and it's just a wrapper. The sweetness was me all along. We let the truth sit between us, comfortable as a chair finally chosen. "Frame it," I suggested. "Put it in the Museum of Misapplied Symbols." She laughed, a sound unbroken. Back room near the broom closet. The next morning I set 2 plates for breakfast without thinking. One for me. One for Lena, not out of habit but because the house remembered us, and we were remembering it back. Saturdays became market mornings. We walked side by side down rows of tents where bread crackled when cut, and peaches bled sugar through thin paper bags. Miguel haggled so loudly that the vendors laughed and gave in just to quiet him. Mrs. Vaux appeared as if summoned, pressing dumpling wrappers into Lena's hands. "You pinch like you mean it," she said firmly. "Life is pinching." Lena laughed, a sound that had once been missing from her voice for too long. She filled her tote with berries, carrots, and cheap brushes from a vendor who didn't know what he had. "They're not Winsor and Newton," she told me, "but sometimes imperfection paints better." In the afternoons, we walked by the river. The pedestrian bridge stretched long and patient across the water, cables humming faintly when the wind shifted. Lena always paused at the center, leaning over the rail to watch the current flash silver in the sun. "Do you think Mum hears us when we talk about her?" she asked one day, eyes fixed on the water. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know she left us instructions. That note in the clock. That was her way of telling us to keep going." Lena smiled faintly. "Then we're doing what she asked." We let petals from Mrs. Vaux's garden fall into the river, watching them spin and scatter like little rafts. "For what we lost," I murmured, "and for what we built," Lena added. Therapy continued. Some weeks Lena came home red-eyed but steadier. She began grounding exercises without me needing to prompt her. 5 things she could see, 4 she could touch, 3 she could hear, 2 she could smell, 1 she could taste. "I used to think it was silly," she admitted once, pulling at her sleeve. "Now it feels like teaching my brain where the exits are." At night I still practice sentences into Iris's recorder. "Don't shout. Don't beg. Present facts. Offer choices." I played them back not for Lena anymore, but for myself, because healing wasn't only hers. One evening, Lena surprised me. She pulled out her sketchbook and showed me a new watercolor. It wasn't a bridge this time. It was our house, porch light glowing, windows warm. At the bottom, penciled simply, "Remembered. It's for Mum," she whispered. "But also for us." I put my hand over hers. "Then it belongs on the wall." We framed it the next day. It hung above Iris's chair, not as a shrine, but as proof. When autumn returned, so did routine. Kids next door started school again, their laughter bouncing through the thin walls like music. The clock ticked faithfully, no longer measuring absence, but marking meals, conversations, repairs, and laughter. Sometimes Lena still caught herself saying before and after, but then she shook her head. "No, before and bridge," she'd correct with a grin, and she'd dance one small ridiculous step to prove it. By December, she painted enough for another showing, this time larger, downtown. The gallery buzzed with people, some strangers, some neighbors who had become more than neighbors. Julia and her mother came, dressed in winter coats. Miguel arrived late with rosemary sprigs tucked into his pocket, like good luck charms. Mrs. Vaux pressed dumplings into the gallery manager's hand, who didn't know what to do but smiled anyway. The centerpiece painting was unmistakable. The bridge over the river, cables stretching into the dusk, painted in layers of indigo and gold. Beneath, in tiny print, Lena had written, "Not after bridge." I stood in front of it, chest heavy and light at the same time. "She's teaching the world what she learned," Julia said softly beside me. "She is," I answered, and for once I didn't feel like an engineer patching cracks. I felt like a father standing on a span his daughter had built herself. That night, back on the porch, the street hummed with winter calm. Lena leaned against the railing, breath curling into the air. "Dad? Thanks for remembering the house back." I looked at the clock through the window, ticking its steady beat. "It remembered us first," I said. "My 65th birthday arrived without fanfare, and that felt right. No decorations sagging from the ceiling, no untouched lasagna cooling on the stove, just a table set with 4 plates, food warm and shared, and laughter that rose without needing coaxing. The cake was Lena's again. She piped Happy 65th Captain across the top, grinning when the icing bled into itself. "Promotion from Dad to Captain," she teased. Miguel raised his glass of ginger ale. "To bridges that hold." Mrs. Vaux lifted melon slices like a toast. "To families that repair." Julia and her mother chimed, "To work well done." When the candles went dark, there was no sting in the smoke. Only warmth. Lena had grown, taller in posture, steadier in voice. She was still painting, but now she was also teaching at the community center twice a week. Her workshops weren't just about art anymore. They were about rebuilding lives. One afternoon I stopped by to find her standing in front of a dozen women and men, brushes in hand. "Watercolor doesn't stay where you put it," she told them. "It spreads, it bleeds. But if you guide it, if you wait, it makes something new. Healing is the same." Her students nodded, dabbing color onto paper. Some of them smiled for the first time that day. I stood in the back, watching. Pride and grief and gratitude blended into something wordless. Damon had long faded into paperwork and whispers. Julia still updated us when necessary, but even she spoke of him less often. He had tried once more, an email about reconciliation, but Lena deleted it without reading. "I don't live in his dictionary anymore," she said simply. Her art spoke instead. One watercolor showed a bridge under repair, scaffolding holding it steady. Another showed a bridge already rebuilt, stretching across a river bright with sunlight. She didn't need captions. The pictures were sermons on paper. The house carried new sounds. Iris's chair creaked under Lena's weight as she painted. The 1979 clock chimed in steady intervals, no longer as a judge but as a witness. The porch filled with conversations on warm nights. Neighbors, friends, even strangers Lena had pulled into her orbit. One evening, she leaned against the doorway, sketchbook under her arm. "Dad, do you still talk to Mom?" "Every day," I said, not always out loud. "But I tell her what we've done, what you've become. And I think if love has echoes, she hears." Lena pressed her lips together, nodding. "Then tell her thank you for the note in the clock. Tell her we remembered." "I will," I promised. At Christmas, Lena gave me a gift, a watercolor of the house, porch lights glowing, windows warm, snow falling gently. Beneath it she had written, "Used time." I traced the letters with my thumb. "You're learning to measure time differently," I said. "So are you," she answered. By spring she held her second gallery show. Bigger, louder, more people. The centerpiece was unmistakable. The bridge over the river at dusk, cables stretching into sky, painted in deep indigo and bright gold. Beneath it, in her tiny handwriting, Legacy. I stood before it, heart unsteady, throat thick. Julia's mother touched my arm. "She is carrying your wife's light," she whispered. "She's carrying her own now," I said. And for the first time I truly believed it. That night Lena sat with me on the porch. The street was quiet, the stars beginning to climb. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Dad?" "Yes. When I was little, I used to think bridges were just things you crossed. Now I know they're what keep you from falling." I swallowed hard. "You built your own, Lena, and it holds." The 1979 clock chimed inside the house, steady as ever, carrying us forward. The year I turned 66, I found myself standing in front of the clock again. The one Iris's father built back in 1979. The one that had carried me through silence, humiliation, and finally into something like peace. Its steady tick no longer felt like judgment. It felt like rhythm. I opened the back panel one more time, tracing the worn edge where Iris's note had lived all these years. "Please remember it back," she had written. I whispered. "We did, Iris, we remembered it back." Lena had bloomed fully by then. Her workshops at the library had become community staples. She painted with children, with retirees, with people who carried grief in their pockets like loose change. "Watercolor forgives," she'd tell them. "And so can you." Her third gallery show opened in the spring. The walls were lined with bridges at dawn, bridges in stormlight, bridges painted half-built and half-repaired. People stood quietly, staring as if each painting was a mirror. The centerpiece was small, tucked in the middle, our house, porch light glowing, windows open. At the bottom she'd written in pencil, "Family isn't the cake you're given. It's the table you keep setting." I pressed my hand against the frame, proud and aching and grateful all at once. On Sunday mornings we still ate together. Eggs fried without sticking, melon slices, dumplings, laughter that made neighbors lean toward open windows. Sometimes Julia and her mother joined, sometimes Miguel and his Rosemary, sometimes just Lena and me. The circle wasn't large, but it was true. One morning Lena looked across the table, hair loose, paint still smudged on her fingers. "Dad, I don't feel like I survived anymore," she said softly. "I feel like I rebuilt." I set my fork down, throat tight. "You did. You rebuilt. And I got to help." We walked to the river often, standing on the pedestrian bridge as cables hummed with wind. One day I pulled a small paper envelope from my pocket, rose petals borrowed from Mrs. Vaux's table. I let a few fall, watching them drift into the current. "For what we lost," I whispered. Lena let the rest scatter from her hands. "And for what we built." We leaned against the rail, not in mourning, but in recognition. The bridge held as bridges do. That night, as I turned off the porch light, the street hummed with ordinary life, children laughing, neighbors calling across fences. The clock inside struck 10, not measuring humiliation, but measuring used time. Good time. I looked at Iris's photo on the mantel. "She's strong," I told it. "She's safe. We're okay." The house creaked back, its old bones answering like only houses know how. Copy that. If anyone asks me how it happened, how an empty birthday stretched into a life I could stand on, I won't say I was brave. They'll say I learned to name the cracks, gather witnesses, and build redundancy into the plan. Family isn't the cake you're handed. It's the table you keep setting, so I keep setting the table. Fewer chairs, truer ones, a lasagna layered with care, and a clock that keeps perfect time because once upon a year, someone made it with love.